Our last speaker in this round is Eileen McLeod, President of the Highland Society.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for coming out this evening, and it's been interesting for me to hear the past three speakers. I feel my role here this evening is to talk about the Antigonish Highland Society and its roots, and with this being our 150th anniversary year, I think we have a lot to celebrate and to discuss. In getting ready for this evening's talk, I only had a couple of days, but there's a book that I feel very strongly about because it's a local book, and it talks about the local experience of Highland women, portrait of Highland women, and it's Teresa McIsaac's book. And the first time I read this book a couple of years ago, it had a tremendous impact on me. It's actually what sparked my desire to get involved in the Highland Society. It spoke to just the fundamental humbleness of the Highland woman and her role in development of a society and a culture in northeastern Nova Scotia, which results in many of the families that are here today. And I think it's a nice counterpoint to the development of the society itself over the years, as it was basically a male-dominated society. I just wanted to kind of pull those two pieces together. At the core of the Highland Scottish culture here is the idea of Scottish folk culture. We were peasants. And her book describes the history of what that looked like, and the horror of the centuries after the arrival of the Scots from Ireland, and obviously the 45 and the clearances that followed. And these folks were obviously driven abroad, and they suffered greatly in foreign countries, and the ones who came to our shores, they came here for this dream of a better life in North America, and it was forged from the adverse social, political, and economic conditions in their homeland. And she goes on to say that those years of oppression and persecution led to a general desire to be free, to be at peace, and to be safe. And the Highlanders, who were subjected to all the things that they were, had lost their language for the most part, and they lost their bagpipes, their kilts, and they longed to restore these elements back into their culture, and they also wanted to practice their faith, and in this case they were mostly Roman Catholic. And so this issue around kilts and so forth, this may not be an issue for 700 years ago, but it certainly was an issue for these Scots who came to our shores in the 1800s. The first generation that arrived here by the mid-1800s had managed not only to survive, but to assemble themselves in churches and community life. And at this point, I'll pop into something that was written by Tony Mackenzie, who was an Antigonish Highland Society historian. Since its birth in the summer of 1861, the Antigonish Highland Society has faced many a crisis: lack of money and of members, bad weather for the games, wartime restrictions, inadequate accommodations, and government neglect. But public-spirited people have come forward in good time and bad to help the society keep the culture of the Scot in eastern Nova Scotia. The founders of the society by 1860 could see that the county of Sydney, now Antigonish, becoming a prosperous and thickly settled area, and they feared that the people might forget the songs, the customs, and the traditions that had brightened their existence during the strenuous pioneer days. The immigrant generation was dying off too, and there was the danger that the old ties, the feeling of kinship and affection for the Scottish homeland would disappear, and so the preservation of this patriotic spirit, the customs, the music, the language, and athletics of Scotland became one of the chief aims of this new society. The others were the welfare of the native country, and by then it was for Nova Scotia for most of them, and the giving of aid to the poor and the distressed neighbours. It goes on to talk about how faithfully did that group deal with that, and there's some interesting discussions around amounts of money. Back then, $20 was a lot, and where it was given. But they also discuss a great deal about the promotion of general welfare. And before there were social programs, this kinship and this coming together to help one another was key and core to the Scottish culture. And so these bonds began to develop in our community, and through the society, money and proceeds from the Highland Games, it was used as a vehicle to raise money, were handed over for things like development of building St. Ninian's Cathedral, as well the St. Martha's Hospital, the Hector Monument in Pictou County, the Culloden Monument, and it goes on and on. And it says at the end, the annual Highland Games have been the Society's most spectacular aid to the continuance of Scottish customs. From a one-day affair, the Games have grown to a full 3 days, representing a large investment in time, money, and effort. and they attract thousands of visitors in preparation for these games. Many athletes, dancers, and musicians receive their training with the Society's help. And then I went in and had a look at when we became a affiliated society back in 1921, or were incorporated. And again, the aims of it were to aid the poor, the needy of its own nationality, to promote the improvement and general welfare of Antigonish County, and to preserve the national spirit, dress, etc., customs, and traditions of the Caledonian, to perpetuate the language and the athletics of Scotland, and to promote the honour, the integrity, and the patriotism of its members, and to create a special bond and brotherhood, and a social bond would be to be among them all. So the history goes on. There's a whole body, it goes on to quote, a whole body of folklore that has grown up around the society and its many colourful characters. And one Scottish tradition that was carried out with enthusiasm was the taking of a drop of spirits to ward off the chills and snakebite. And in 1877, 36 bottles of whiskey and 6 bottles of brandy and wine were needed for that gathering. And it says in it, no wonder, as an old member once said, one of the Society's chief monuments is a hell of a pile of empty bottles. And so that was an interesting little snippet there. Challenges for the Society have never changed. Low membership, sometimes the weather situation. These things have always been talked about, I guess, in local organization. But this society is a real thing, and I'm going to bump over to where we actually find ourselves now. The Antigonish Highland Games is the oldest continuous running Highland Games held outside of Scotland, and it's scheduled this year for July the 3rd to the 10th. The 148th edition is a showcase of Scottish culture that is rated among the top 3 Highland Games in Canada. It has a reputation worldwide and has been built on, we say, authenticity, attention to detail, and hospitality that makes the Antigonish Games a must-see event for thousands of spectators. The Games feature both young artisans and professional performers in a series of under-the-tent ceilidhs and main stage concerts. Our authentic competitions include the 6 disciplines of the ancient Scottish heavy events, Highland dancing, piping and drumming, tug-of-war, and now a bike race and 5-mile road race, and this year it includes an elite mile. Some of the events that take place there may not be considered to be authentic, but they are the rally point around which that this community has created an unofficial homecoming. And that homecoming is increasingly important to us as a group. Generations see their little children dancing in these various events. The ones who don't have children yet are partying in the ceilidh tents. People who are starting to wonder what their last name means go and see the clan tents and start to pick up some history there. And now we're building in other things so that there are workshops for the language, etc. This year, being our anniversary year, we want to highlight that the Highland Society is a year-round activity and event. We started off by participating in the New Year's Levee this year. Robbie Burns Day was a wonderful evening. Gaelic Heritage presentations. There's this Tartan Day event. Coming up is the Claude Memorial event in Noidart. And it goes on and on. But one of the most exciting aspects of the last couple of years has been our partnering. And this partnering is standing outside of our communities with dances and ceilidhs and so forth, but also the Gaelic conference that we've been doing with the Office of Gaelic Affairs. And we're progressing in terms of making these relationships. And also, we are working through the Antigonish Culture Roundtable to continue to partner with existing organizations in the community for things like art, and also to share networking lists to encourage people to attend each other's events and to build on this block of Scottish heritage. Many of us are not going to be able to speak to the language acquisition. We don't speak Gaelic, but the cultural aspect of it has brought us together as a homogeneous community. We work well with one another, we support each other. You need to only go to a funeral or to a wedding or an event here to see the support that families receive. This is from our culture. And I guess the last part that I'll say is, while we may not specifically have the language, many of us feel very strongly that the tradition of the Scot is in our blood. It's part of our Highland heritage. We're proud of it.